everybody doing? Having an okay day? Good. All right, guys, by show of hands here, I want you to give me some feedback. Within the next 2 weeks, between this week and next week, how many of you have major exams in one or more of your classes? Okay. Guys, I regret to inform you on the first side of things, this will be one of those classes. We will be having our exam sometime between now, most likely, and next Wednesday. Here's the good news. If you've been paying attention in class, you're going to be fine. We're going to review. I will be sending you a review and study sheet once we get done with Chapter 3. There should be no big surprises. If you have been listening in class, especially if you've been participating in class, you're going to be in a fantastic spot. But there are also some bonus points to come to bear, and we're going to be talking about that too. Before we get in for today, though, we have a few items of check-in for today. First is, yes, sir?
So we don't have a test today?
We don't have a test today. Now, why did you guys think we had a test today? Was it, let me guess, it was in the syllabus that today would be a test? No, there's no test today, guys. See, I've just already made your days better. There's no test today. Is there anything better? Have you ever woken up on Saturday and thought it was Friday and discovered it was Saturday? How awesome do you feel when that happens, right? Yeah, there's no test today. So the test will most likely be sometime between now and next Wednesday. See, you're welcome. Guys, the economic systems exercise and online discussion, a couple of you have not yet submitted those. Those are overdue. Guys, I'm not going to penalize you for those if I have them in my inbox by the time I get back to my office this afternoon. So if you have not submitted those, submit them. Avoid the late penalty points. And also, a couple of you have had to ask to resubmit your work because you submit them as text files and not as Microsoft Word documents. Please don't make me take points off that. Resubmit those as soon as you can. We're also going to be covering the top 10 assignment, which is due on the 7th. This is the easiest assignment you will do in a class this year. And guys, after we get done with Chapter 3, we're going to be doing our first test. Now, what is the top 10 exercise? I'm going to explain it to you, but I'm going to demonstrate it in class on Wednesday. What I'm asking you to do, guys, is to go to the Forbes Global 2000 list. If you want to, you can do this on your laptops while I'm talking to you now. I'm asking you to tell me in the world who the top 10 countries are by sales and by profits, and which countries are on both lists. It sounds pretty easy. People screw up this exercise all the time because they don't know how to manipulate the lists. If you do a Google search for the Forbes Global 2000, you can find them. Now, there are ways to manipulate the ways the companies are listed. I will cover that on Wednesday. This is due on the 7th. What I'm also asking you to do is to tell me what the unemployment rate is for your state. If you are international, use, I'm sorry, not your state, your city. If you're international, use Cambria County, Loretto, Ebensburg, because that's currently where you're located. I'm asking you to tell me what the unemployment rate specific to your area is and to verify where you got that information. The reason I do this is because the unemployment rate can vary greatly from one region to the next. We're going to be covering both these things on Wednesday. And again, the Global 2000 list. If you've already submitted this exercise, you may want to resubmit it after you see what I'm going to explain on Wednesday. So no sweat. And by the way, guys, just so we're clear, as I said at the beginning of the semester, we've got the syllabus, which is an ideal. We've got our in-class experience, which is reality. If there's a due date on the syllabus or there's a due date I announce in class, which should you listen to? You got it. We're always going to be a little behind as long as we have some discussion. The syllabus is an ideal. Guys, one of the other things to remind you, too, although we're still finishing Chapter 3, our next experience together, after we get done with Chapter 3 and the test, we're going to be starting what I refer to as the stock game. I'm going to be asking you to assemble in groups of 4 to 5 to be able to do your stock game. For the month of October, we're going to be playing the stock market. If you want to go ahead outside of class time and pick your 5 people, that's fine with me. We'll be discussing it in class as well. You're all going to be sharing a grade. I encourage you to think about who you want on your team. So we'll be talking about that later this week as well. Guys, I'm just curious too, before we get into the work today, I know a few people made it to meet Dr. Uslan in one way or another. Any thoughts or input? Did anybody get to see the presentation? If so, what was your reaction? Yes, sir.
I just thought it was overall a good speech or talk.
He was very entertaining too, wasn't he?
He was pretty funny.
And you know, it was crazy. Right before that speech, that poor man had to spend an hour on the phone because his flight to LA got canceled. He had to be in Los Angeles the next day for the premiere of the Joker movie. How crazy is that? Like, the guy who made that movie happen was in Loretto on Friday night. Crazy. Any other reactions? What did you guys think? If you got to see him speak or you got to meet him, any other impressions? What do you think? I was in my zone on Friday. I got to meet one of my heroes and hang out with him all day and discover he was, pardon my French, cool as hell. Like, it's awesome when you meet your heroes and they're honest to God, nice people. Anybody else get to see that presentation? Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy meeting him? If you didn't come, I'm sorry you didn't come. It was really a great presentation. Guys, first thing we're going to do today, I sent you all an email this morning. First thing, I'm asking you now to check your email and to install Respondus Lockdown Browser. So if you got your laptop, please check your email. I want to make sure you all have it because you need it for the first test we're going to take. So take a minute and log on to your computer. It should work on Mac and Apple. Did you guys all get the email? All right. So do you guys already have it on your computers? Lockdown Browser? Okay. Well, show of hands here. Who already has Lockdown? All right. If you don't, please download that. We're going to take a minute at class time to make sure everybody's good. Go ahead and follow the instructions on Lockdown Browser. The other thing I'm asking you to do too, guys, it's a 0 credit thing, but under Chapter 3 in Canvas, there is a mock test. If you take that mock test, it'll confirm that your Lockdown Browser is working correctly. So take a second, we'll install it. Once we get everybody installed, we'll move forward with the lecture this morning. Anybody having any problems downloading? Guys, what I'm going to do is assume that you're downloading this and you're not having problems. If you're having problems with it, speak now or speak to me after class. We're going to go ahead and jump into the lecture for today. So if you're having issues, please hit me up. And we will also just do a check-in on Wednesday and make sure everybody has that. Even though we got a busy class day ahead of us, I want to check in with some current... Yes?
What's supposed to be the point?
You notice it was transporting goods and services, like it was transporting bricks. This is a small model. They make a larger one that looks like a horse. So we're talking about something that essentially is a labor-saving, independent device. Anybody find them a little creepy? Yeah, they're very off-putting. Has anybody here watching the TV show Black Mirror? Yeah, have you seen the episode with the dogs? Yeah, so guys, why is a company like Boston Dynamics, what is their big goal with this kind of technology? Why are they creating these monstrosities? What do you think? Why are they creating these things? Exactly right. We're talking about next level automation. If we can make these things bigger and stronger where they can actually move payload, most labor is already automated in factories to begin with. What else did you notice from this? I mean, we're talking about a company named Boston Dynamics. Does anybody in this room know who owns this company? If you think of the biggest tech company in the world, who would you think of? So we got a guess for Apple. Who else? Google. This company is owned by Google. So we're talking about a company that is owned by Google making their first commercially available utility robot. They make one that's 3 times this size, that literally is the size of a pack mule, that they're prototyping to say, could we have these serving in the military in Afghanistan? Theoretically, if these robots can learn how to stand and walk upright, which they're working on as well, we could see automation of major sections of the labor force. I find it personally both fascinating and terrifying. And the very fact that these things look so close to human, or look so close, in this case, to canine, there's something we call the uncanny valley. Has anybody ever heard that term? The uncanny valley means when something comes so close to looking like something else, but just isn't. It's very off-putting. For example, how many of you have ever seen the movie The Polar Express? There are elements of the population, and I'm one of them, who can't watch that movie. It's too off-putting to me. Something about the way the characters look almost human, but not human. It unnerves me somehow. And there's a section of the population that has that reaction to that film. It's the same deal with these kinds of robots. I think it's interesting to think that this is the start of it. And it's 2019. What are we going to be seeing by 2022? Yes, sir.
I'm still a little bit confused about the usefulness of these things.
Mm-hmm.
What can these do that a Goliath can't?
What's a Goliath?
That was basically during World War II. They made mini tanks. It was a tank that was like that big.
Uh-huh.
So you could do the same thing. You could put a payload in it, but it was tracked. So
Well, this thing can
go anywhere a tank can.
This thing can do it by itself. Nobody has to drive it.
Can they pick things up though?
Yeah, did you see it open the door for the other one?
Yeah, like but they can pick up payloads and put them in the back.
Well, that's where they're headed. That's definitely where they're headed. In fact, since we're talking about it, I'll show you another one. I'll be interested to see what kind of an impact they have in the long run. Any other thoughts? Make friends with them. When they take over, you want to be one of the humans to survive. So, guys, yeah, at the end, you'll still need somebody to change the batteries and oil the joints, maybe. We were talking about the continuum of how we get into foreign markets. We were talking about low risk, like franchising. We were talking about low risk, the idea of ways we can get into other countries without putting significant investments. And we're moving on down the continuum. I think we left off talking about franchises, for example. Well, now we're going to talk about joint ventures. A joint venture is a way that two companies can collaborate. They share risk, they share technology, they share resources. Typically speaking, a joint venture is a limited term kind of partnership. For example, there was a joint venture between Chevrolet, GM, and Ford Motor Company. If you buy an F-150 or you buy a new Silverado, many of those pickups share the same transmission. They're both made by the same company in a joint venture. They do this so they can share risk. So the idea being that we're not going to have to put out as much of our own resources to do so. So a joint venture is a short-term project. Companies do them all the time. That's different than a strategic alliance. A strategic alliance is something that is more long-term. So if we're going long-term with a partner, we've got a strategic alliance. An example might be, a few years ago, when Microsoft put out their newest Windows operating system, they embedded video conferencing software, I should say, that was developed by Skype. So that's the idea of a long-term strategic alliance. We're going to use your products to make our products better. For example, if you think of high-end car audio, is there a brand that you think of? Begins with a B. Bose. If you see that certain car manufacturers exclusively use Bose components, that would be an example of a strategic alliance. Now, it can get a little hairy in terms of trying to determine the difference between the two. For example, I always talk about car analogies because I love cars. BMW and Toyota recently had a joint venture for a specific purpose. If you've seen the new Toyota Supra, that's shared engineering between Toyota and BMW. They did that for a very specific purpose. So that is a joint venture. A strategic alliance, again, would be the idea of Microsoft using Skype to build their embedded video chat client. So that's the differences between those two approaches. So remember that. More limited term is joint venture. More long term is a strategic alliance. Then we get into the higher end of risk. And we're talking about actually putting money into a foreign country. There are some countries, for example, the United States, we're very open to a company from another country coming and buying a chain of stores or actually setting up their own market in the United States. For example, if you go to AMC Theaters, I think AMC Theaters is actually owned by a group out of China at this point in time. Even though they're our largest theater chain in the United States, they're actually owned by a foreign company. If we, as the United States, want to operate in China, however, we need to have a partner in the region. Some countries require you to have a local partner to be able to set up a business in a given area. We call that foreign direct investment. So if you're setting up a factory, you're investing in that country, you're putting infrastructure in, that's foreign direct investment. Now that's different than a foreign subsidiary. For example, if you have a Ford, or if you've got a GM, or you've got a Toyota, those are all made by foreign subsidiaries in other countries. In the United States, if there's a Toyota plant operating, it's a foreign subsidiary of Toyota, which is based out of what country? What country is Toyota based out of? Japan. And in the same way, for example, by the way, who are my car guys in here? Have you ever salivated over European Fords because of how much better they are than the ones that we get in the States, like the Focus RS and all these amazing cars? They're made by Ford subsidiary Ford Europe or Ford UK, for example. And so the advantage of this kind of stuff, if we're setting up a foreign subsidiary, we still have control. The disadvantage is we still have to go to other countries. We have to deal with differences in currency. We have to deal with differences in culture as well. Here's the big difference, guys. If we have a car company operating in Europe versus one operating in the United States, we like to think, for example, if you're a CEO of a U.S. company, you're making big bucks. Well, here's the deal. If you take the highest paid person in a United States company and the lowest paid person, there's a greater distance between those two. In European countries, they tend to be what we refer to as flatter organizations. The pay difference between the highest and lowest paid person tends to be more compressed. So that would be a disadvantage for American companies because you've got to adapt to that culture as well. Then we get into what we refer to as multinational corporations. And that means that we've got some company that is so diversified, that is so global, and is operating in so many places at the same time, they truly are a global company. I'm thinking of a beer company that's famous for its green bottle and its red star. Who am I thinking? Heineken. Heineken, look this company up sometime. These guys are about as international as it gets. They set up infrastructure and companies everywhere they go. And by the way, I'll digress about one of my favorite food products, beer, for a moment. Heineken does a lot of good for the global economy. When they come into a given region, for example, if they come in and they want to serve a population that does not have high-quality water, they'll upgrade the water infrastructure. They'll upgrade the roads for shipping. They'll even upgrade the schools and the local infrastructure to make life better for the workers. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Is there a downside to that kind of multinationalism? What might be a downside? Yes? It does definitely concentrate power for sure. Let's say Pete is a local beer manufacturer and I'm Heineken. I can come in with billions of dollars of resources. What's going to happen to his little company? We're going to start making beer that competes with his. That company's going to go under. It's the Walmart effect, but on a global scale. So again, not all global businesses are multinational. Some businesses truly do concentrate power in one area. For example, Google is a great example of a company that is truly multinational because they've got headquarters all over the world. Some companies maintain power in a single location. So again, a business can be global without truly being multinational. And then we get into something that's a little kind of complex. So I'm going to take a minute to talk about it. And we call it sovereign wealth funds. Sovereign wealth funds literally mean you've got a country that has money to invest and buy up infrastructure. Right now, there's a continent that both Eastern and Western powers are trying to get control of because this continent is huge, has a big population, has tons of natural resources, and will probably be the next big thing in terms of the global economy. What continent am I thinking of? Asia's a good guess. We're already getting into Asia. Who am I thinking of? It's a big continent. You got it. Africa is the next big thing. If you want to know why the United States and China are both putting such big amounts of capital in this country, Africa is rich in oil, it's rich in diamonds, it's rich in natural resources, and it's very heavily populated, which means we have a built-in potential consumer base. So sovereign wealth funds, for example, if you're the Chinese government, you may be trying to buy up oil fields. You might be trying to buy up deposits of natural gas, or at this point in time, rare earth elements, which power all of our smartphones. So those are big things. Those are things that we have geopolitical objectives. So in terms of foreign direct investment, taking a step back, one of the big points that we question, for example, is what is an American car? What is a Japanese car? Where was your product actually made? You guys remember from the last conversation we had, where's the Chevy Suburban made? It's made in Mexico. The biggest, baddest American SUV is made in Mexico. Anybody have a guess, percentage-wise? What is the most American-made car on the road in the United States? It is the Toyota. Do you know what model?
I was going to say, I want to say the Tundra, but I think
It is the Camry. You guys both had good guesses. The Tundra, by the way, was designed in the United States for the American market. Guys, if you look at this, in terms of total amount, percentage of American parts, Toyota Camry, which is made in Kentucky and Indiana, 3/4 of the parts in that car were made in the United States. Compare that to the Ford Fusion, which is manufactured in Michigan, but very few of its parts actually come from the U.S. The Ford Fusion is only 30%. The Ford Fusion is on its way out because Ford's done with cars anyway. But the Toyota Camry is more American-made than a Ford Fusion. You can't predict this stuff, guys. So, guys, we're going to do a little group exercise this morning. We're going to break you up a little bit, and we're going to have you getting involved in another country. So our first group is going to be operating in China. Our second group is going to be operating in Guinea. Our third group is going to be operating in Australia, and our fourth is Germany. So we're going to make it easy so we can be fast this morning. You guys, these 2 rows, and over to Shelby, you guys are group 1. Starting here, just hold back, you guys are group 2. You guys are group 3, and you guys are group 4. So we're asking group 1, you're an American company setting up in China. Group 2, you're an American company setting up in Guinea. Group 3, you're setting up in Australia. And group 4, you're setting up in Germany. Here's what I want to know. What are you going to make, and are you going to start a new company or use an existing company? How are you going to get into that market? Are you going to use licensing? Which means, for example, the Nike logo, we're just going to have somebody else make shirts for us. We're going to do direct exporting, which means we're going to make product over in that country for export, or we're going to export our product there. It can go either way. We're going to franchise, which means we're going to start up a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A. We're going to do contract manufacturing, which we're going to pay somebody to make product for us over there. We could do a joint venture, a strategic alliance, which we're getting with a local company in that region to be able to help us make something. Or we're going to do foreign direct investment. What I'm asking you to do is to say what product you're going to make and why. So let's start some conversation. Okay, so our first group, we got over here, we got China. Guys, how are we going to be getting into this market? What's our strategy?
We're gonna get into China using a Go Green subway system with foreign direct investment into China. We were thinking of using a strategic alliance, but she just mentioned that sending American parts over for manufacturing might offset the costs. The company which we were planning to alliance with, which was Changchun Railway, and we feel like if we added the Go Green aspect to the marketing campaign, it would help ease us into the economy, because China obviously is very polluted at the moment.
Sure. And the country is facing 2 challenges. They're simultaneously the world's largest producer of solar panels and the world's largest producer of smog. So we're talking for a foreign direct investment here, and I like that strategy for China. Why is that a good strategy for China? It's a good strategy. Why is it good? Yeah, please. Why is foreign direct investment a good strategy for China? Because it is.
So yeah. China's one of the largest growing economies at the moment. So if the United States went in for a direct investment into China, then they would profit from it.
Absolutely, and it's more or less a requirement. The way the Chinese government runs their business, essentially, you've got to have a local partner if you want to do business in China. The only thing I would politely disagree with, I don't know if you're going to have an easy time getting American parts into there. I think American designs are going to work really well. I think local manufacturing is probably going to save you money. I'm not saying that it's not a possibility. The other issue would be, what do we have currently going on between our 2 countries right now? We got a trade war going on. And so right now, tariffs are going to apply if you're importing products. That's not to say you can't do business over there, but you might save yourself some substantial costs by actually doing the manufacturing over there for the time being. What do you think your challenges are going to be? What do you think? Yes?
I think just building something like a giant subway system would be hard, just for the fact that the country is so populated, and getting large areas of acres and acres of land to be not populated would be most difficult.
I completely agree. And has anyone here been following what Elon Musk is trying to do with the Hyperloop system? Have you heard about this? Who here has ever gone through a drive-through bank with their parents? The vacuum tubes that you can put money in to deposit. Elon Musk, Tesla guy, his idea is that we're going to make those the size of a car and actually use vacuum tubes to go from one place to another in the United States using essentially high-powered vacuums. I mean, if space is a vacuum, you can move very quickly with very little energy. So what you're talking about basically would be designing a very similar system to that. I would be more inclined to do this on a consultation basis than maybe even for foreign direct investment. If you come up with it, you can even license it. Although that's also going to be difficult to do in a foreign country, especially one that doesn't reciprocate trade. Regardless, to get into that country, you're going to have a local partner. I love the idea. I think it's a challenging aspect, but I think it could be very profitable as well. Really, really creative idea, guys. Let's get back to our second group in Guinea.
We said that we'd probably set up mining for aluminum ore because it's one of like your top mining things.
Yep.
And we would probably direct export it to an aluminum company or something like somebody who makes aluminum foil or aluminum products. We said that we'd probably get it out by either like planes or boats or one of those two.
The challenge that you're going to face in Guinea, and I got my inside information. I used to do some sort of connected project work in Guinea. It's very difficult to get product in and out of that country. It's very expensive. So you're going to have to probably build your own infrastructure as well, literally down to roads and possibly even airports. They don't even have in the country of Guinea reliable national postage. So even sending things back and forth can be challenging. Now, it could be a pretty interesting investment if you've got nice pockets of aluminum from which to harvest. And when I say this, I don't mean to put judgment on anybody at all. It's just a statement of fact. Are the labor prices lower or higher than the United States and Guinea? They're going to be much lower because you got a high poverty rate as well. So that could be a viable traditional business, no two ways about it. Any other input from the group on that one? We're going to go into our Australians next. What are we doing in Australia, guys?
We wanted to open a franchise of Five Guys,
Oh, nice.
and we wanted to add a few things to it to make it a little bit better than normal, especially since we're taking a risk opening it in Australia.
Okay.
I did some research on my laptop, and they take 32% of their food budget to fast food restaurants in Australia.
Wow. So a lot of people eat fast food, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of subways and things like that that aren't really just a normal burger place.
Mm. And I would say also Australia is a very meat-centric culture, is it not? People like barbecue over there. They like meat. I think you got potentially a winner by doing a franchise over there. Are there any local cultural considerations you need to take into consideration?
We were thinking about adding beer to the menu.
I support that decision.
Also, we want to partner with Uber Eats. Because half the fast food is bought through Uber Eats in Australia.
Okay, so you're going to get some franchisees who are going to be local. So you as a company are going to be taking on very little risk because you're basically selling the name and the recipe. Now, the local challenges might be, for example, if you're the first franchisee, might be things like supply chains. For example, in the United States, if I open up a McDonald's in Loretto, Pennsylvania, where am I getting my supplies from? I'm still getting them from McDonald's. McDonald's has a system where they'll deliver everything I need, and to some extent use some local suppliers. But if you're the first Five Guys over there, it will be significant investment to get the system up. But once you have that, your franchises can spread out. And you may actually use local sourcing for things like your meat anyway. I like that idea. And our last group, we're going to Germany. Did you guys settle on a franchise as well? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, we decided to go with trying to open Chick-fil-A's internationally. So, what we decided to do is to franchise them out, kind of follow the Chick-fil-A model with the owner-operator, where you still have a lot of corporate control, but it's still technically a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
But we discussed probably going to have to go with a joint venture as well. Go with one of the major supermarket chains, and you know how there's Subways in front of and McDonald's in front of Walmart.
Sure.
Trying to do that because Chick-fil-A is really good at like mall restaurants, so just translating that right over. So basically, you're doing fast food in Germany in a fast area, where they can hit Chick-fil-A, get used to the product. You know, somewhere where it's really visible, where they're already walking past, and they're going to be more likely to stop in.
Very innovative.
Another thing, as I'm looking up here, obviously it's a different culture from the United States. Fast food is still relevant in Germany. I know that they're probably a little healthier than the United States, but
Most countries are.
yeah, but they actually the one thing Germans can't get enough is I can't pronounce, well, kebabs, but I'm trying to see how to pronounce this. Who's Japanese class? Yeah. How do you pronounce?
K-Rob. It's good.
Yeah.
What do we have?
Döner kebab. Döner. D-O-N-E-R. Döner.
Döner.
Ga je back on the way. Done it?
Döner.
We're all learning something.
Döner kebab. It's
It's mean from, it's supposed to be,
It's a German, Turkish, fast food kind of fast food.
So it's a kebab. Okay.
anyways.
Anyway.
You have to shape, just like McDonald's and all those other different fast foods have different stuff on the menu in different countries. You have to shape that around a little bit, and maybe sell some beer, because it's Germany. And if they can, that's right.
One of the best ways we're looking at doing that is if we can partner with local companies. Because, like I said, obviously it's going to be probably a fight at the top level to get the Cathys to agree to it. But if you can get them to agree to it because of the cultural difference, you can partner, because Germany has a lot of local breweries. You can partner with local breweries to be selling the local beer, and then also introducing things like pulled pork sandwiches that are very American, but still because pork is
Heavily available.
and it's more popular. That way, you can still be marketing along with the kebabs. A very Southern American thing.
Interesting.
Along with that.
I think Chick-fil-A may face one unique challenge in Europe as well. When I say this, I'm not setting judgment on anybody. It's just a statement of fact. Generally speaking, many parts of Europe have more liberal cultures than the United States. And of course, what's been the big controversial issue with Chick-fil-A in the United States, other than being closed on Sunday? What's the other controversial issue? Exactly. And so you may get some pushback on your marketing for that as well. Not saying it's not worth taking on, because it's a big market. Yes?
We actually did discuss that, and we discussed really trying to pull that back in Europe, trying to make that much less visible, and just really pushing the food, rather than, kind of the local things that you're introducing, but, the Southern American thing, trying to get that, pushing the food and trying to pull back a little bit on how visible the values are, and at least until you're really well established.
I think you've got a strong potential, and it's a group that might actually pull in a lot of people who wouldn't normally try American food as well. Guys, nice job. We're going to hit a couple other slides before we end our day today, because we have a couple minutes left. We talked about all these things that play into global trade, and you nailed a lot of these issues during our conversation. We start talking about socio-cultural factors. What we're basically talking about, in certain parts of the world, people have preferences. People, for example, if you go to Israel, we mentioned this in the previous class, you won't sell a lot of cheeseburgers in Israel, because in Israel you don't mix meat and dairy. If you go to India, for example, a large part of the population in India is vegetarian. By the way, can anybody take a guess? In the United States, what percentage of the population identifies themselves as vegetarian or vegan? Out of 100% of the population. Got a guess? Less than 5% is correct. It's about 3%. That being said, companies like Impossible and Beyond Meat still see a market because a lot of people are trying to limit their intake of meat, even people who do eat meat. Then we've got economic and financial. When we were talking to the folks in Guinea back here, for example, high poverty rates, low incomes translate into products are difficult to afford. So you've got to be able to make products that will work well for your given region. We get into legal and regulatory. For example, in the United States, we lowered the corporate tax rate a few years ago to make our country more appealing to foreign investors. Some countries have higher barriers to entry and higher amounts of regulation. We're pretty unregulated in many parts of this country. We like to think, for example, our food is safe because we've got USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, inspectors. But if you saw how little of our food actually gets inspected, you might be a little curious about what you should buy when you get into the grocery store. And then we get into the physical and environmental environments. Basically, what kind of resources do we have and how do we work within those? Guys, if you're going into a given area, you got to think about these things. Some countries have social structures that emphasize caste systems, and that means you're born into a specific social caste and you can't move beyond it. That also determines your buying power, for example. We mentioned Chick-fil-A being closed on Sunday. You've also got to think about religion. For example, if you go to a Muslim country, Muslim banks have a very unique feature that we don't see in Western banks. What don't they charge? Yeah, Muslim banks do not charge interest because that goes against the religion itself. We start talking about manners and customs. If you're doing business, for example, in countries, you need to know what is and what is not appropriate. For example, I had a great conversation with some of our international students. We start talking proximity, for example, physical proximity. Like, is this a comfortable distance for us to have a conversation? No. It's very uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable too. If I go back this far, it's much more comfortable, is it not? That's a socio-cultural standard. We need to know that when we're doing business as well, because everybody's got their own ways of doing things. And in terms of things like values and attitudes, there are some countries that have very lackadaisical cultures, some are very punctual. If you're in the United States and East Coast culture, on time is usually 5 minutes early. If you go to the West Coast in our own country, it's more laid back. Language and personal communication are also things we need to think about as well. And I will pick this up on Wednesday. But guys, before you leave, a couple of reminders. Make sure your lockdown browser is working. We're going to test it out one more time on Wednesday. We're going to be having our first exam sometime before the next week is out. We will have a review session. You will have a study guide. Any questions before I let you go today? Have a great day, guys.